Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. How are you? So today we are going to, work on our lab. I'm going to finish up some notes based on. I'm going to finish up some notes on, snmp, network management, and in particular how to link that to Apache. So we talked about that web services on Monday, right? And so today is our lab time. So my plan is I'll do a discussion, and then hopefully we'll have time, and then you guys can ask questions if you're stuck in some of the labs. So I won't really spend the whole time lecturing. All right. Are there any questions before I get started?
Not right now. No.
Okay. All right. No questions. All right. So let's just, we're kind of at this point, wrapping up the semester. Okay. So, I don't know if you've realized, but really just after today, we just have 1 week left of new content. And that's going to be next week. Both of those labs are pretty good labs, but they're very easy labs in my opinion. So that's why we're going to just do, just basically do 2 labs, Monday and Wednesday, kind of go through them. So I do have some slides, though. I do have some slides. So the plan then after that, remember, is your presentation. So I remind you, you have your Hadoop demo, and then you have your, your research topic on system administration that you also have to have a demo for. So don't forget about that, please. You can work on your teams, if you want, that's okay. Or individual, however you want to do it is fine. All right, so that's basically it. That's the plan. So we're now at getting close to the end of the semester. All right, so I'm really throwing in, in a lot of these kind of miscellaneous, slides. There's little topics here and there that I think I should, at least mention a little bit. So for instance, today, I'll mention, besides some of the technical things, I'll mention that system administration is a service-oriented profession, right? You provide basically services for other people, and so there's the whole, dealing with people issue, right? There's lead times, usually you're measured a lot of the time by resolving issues, but also the lead time, how long it takes you in the system, to whenever somebody opens a ticket for you to close it, how do you track that? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I'm not going to spend too much time on it because you can literally just read the slides. But basically we'll talk about customer care, help desks. Obviously the standard solution is ticketing system, which, by the way, I should say, I've been giving examples of projects that students have done in past semesters. And one of them is a ticket system. I think some of them did like Spiceworks. You can always find these systems that are, they're free for a few basic services. And it could be something as simple as a ticketing system. So show in the class, okay, this is how you open a ticket. Then this is how the system administrator would see it. I mean, it's certainly like if you started, whether you're at a medium size or even a small organization, it would not be a bad idea to have a ticketing system and to handle all your orders through that, your work orders, because that will just give you better control. It allows you at the end of the month, and companies usually they do this, right? At the end of the month, you have a meeting, and then you look at the lead times, and then you have goals like, why did that one take 6 months? Why is that issue still open after 6 months? And it's maybe that you forgot, or it just, it wasn't important anymore, but it wasn't close in the system. So a lot of that can happen. And so that's always useful to have. All right. So just a few little issues like that, but I've gone over the slides again for the whole semester, and I pretty much covered everything, even the managerial topics here and there. So we're good, doing good there. So anyway, so as you know, we're in this lab. This is, as I said, this lab might seem very, I don't know, stressful or maybe like very difficult to do because you'll see all this code and you'll think, oh man, but really you have to do very little coding. Okay, you might have to change IP addresses and things like that, but the code is given. And it's really, and I want to stress this a lot, it's really about integrating it. It's so that, it's like it's a system administration configuration. So the software developer gave you, the system administrator, all the code already. And they just said, hey, please, build a website with this. All right. And so that's really what you're going to do. So the difficult part should be the configuration of, Apache and everything that's in the handout. Remember the handout, I don't like to give tutorials, right? Because, there's no gain in you just following a perfect set of instructions. So it's really, that's more of a Unix suggested set of steps, but for your particular version, it's always changing, right? So it's always changing. So make sure you, who is 127013, guys? You have to give me your name because I need to know. Who is that? I don't want to get zoom boom here. Okay, I'm gonna let him in, but guys, whoever is 12713, please use your names, okay? Sign out maybe and use your name because of zoom booming and all that, that would be terrible if, and there's 2 now. Okay, so again, guys, please, use your names. It's not you, it's just because of I don't want any anything to happen here. All right, anyway, I'm recording this video, remember. So anyway, so anyway, that being said, let's, kind of wrap up. So network management, as you know, this is really, my last slide on network management. So, I started with what is network management. Then I gave the classic example of snmp. And then, which is, I think it's, such an amazing thing, honestly. And then, now I'm just going to wrap up network management with these slides, and then we're going to move into some miscellaneous topics. Okay, so let's go ahead. So you guys are looking at my slides, correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so we've talked about network management in general, and like I said, there's, snmp is just one example. There are other solutions that people can create, right? Obviously, it's money. This is a kind of thing that can lead to money, and so but usually I think since we discussed the protocol, you can probably see that how a lot of people do it, right? So a lot of people will take that approach to build their own application. Okay. So as I said, in today's lab, you guys will be building your own. So, my goal is always, it's everything here in Linux is a tool. I think I say that all the time. It's not don't think of it, oh, it's a server that I have to manage. No, Linux is your tool to do just about anything. And so, if you can write code and if you understand how things work in the background, you have a lot of power. And so that's really what today's lab is about, right? So today's lab, which I will talk about in a while, that lab is really meant to give you more flexibility. All right, so just to wrap up, so network management. Okay, so we talked about it, the ISO definitions of network management. So again, these are like the pillars of it, right? So you look at performance management, configuration management, accounting management, fault management, and security, in some way, right? So network management, obviously, it's like you're like CCTV for the police, right? So you're looking at things. So it's monitoring, so it's security in that sense. Although from the standpoint of the protocol, I did say that it doesn't have that much security. So anyway, so I've discussed all of this, and all right, so there's other things out there. So that's really the, kind of what I wanted to how I wanted to wrap it up. So there's protocol capabilities for management as well. So you guys know, for instance, Telnet, Secure Shell, SSH, right? So those are tools that any manager can use. If you have your servers in the cloud, you're going to connect via an SSH. You're not going to use Telnet. Okay.
Professor, is there?
Yes, go
You
ahead.
sound like a Decepticon.
Do I really?
Yeah, you sound.
How do
like
I sound like a Decepticon?
It sounds like you're about to ask for the Allspark or Earth will be destroyed. You sound like Megatron.
Okay.
Are you?
I don't know what that means, actually.
You sound like a robot.
Like my voice sounds like a robot?
Yeah, it's like you're auto-tuning your voice. Is there any way you can clear that up?
So my voice right now so you've listened to other videos and you're saying that right now it's coming out as different?
Yeah, it's like spotty. You sound fine.
It's like breaking up all the time.
Yeah, it's breaking
weird.
up. It's
Oh,
more
really?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's all right.
I don't know. I mean, I'm literally doing the exact same thing. The only thing I could think of would be resetting my router. I'm at home, right? So, I mean, I just have my router. Do you want me to restart the session? Is that what you want me to do?
You sound better now. I don't know. If
I didn't do anything. I mean, I could move the laptop closer to me. I mean, that's about all I can think of. I'm not using a microphone either, so I don't have a microphone. I'm using
maybe move it closer and let's see what happens.
Okay, it's as close as I can get to it without like putting my face on the screen.
All right, let's just roll.
Still doesn't sound. It still doesn't sound good.
It sounds
it
better.
sounds good now.
Okay, I don't know. I don't have. I mean, it's a valid point. So you guys didn't hear anything I said?
No, I can. It was like every fifth or sixth word it would
Cut out.
Yeah.
Okay. How is that like the Decepticons? That's a. I'm gonna have.
Well, he's all like, I can't do a Megatron voice. It was just sounded weird.
Okay. All right. Well, let's. I can only reset my router or reset this Zoom. Otherwise, we could continue like this.
Let's just keep on going and see what happens.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Okay. So, if it keeps not working like this, what I can do is just restart everything. Maybe if I restart it might work better.
It sounds fine now.
It sounds fine now. Yeah. I don't know. So, I don't know what to tell you.
It was just at the beginning. I think it's cutting off.
Okay. All right. Well, let's keep trying this. All right. So where was I? Let's see. Oh yeah. So so I gave. We were talking about network management, right? And then we talked about SNMP and that protocol. And now I'm just wrapping it up with some final protocol capabilities for management. You can see them there on the screen. So, Telnet, Secure Shell, so you can remote in. We talked about remote services on Monday, I believe. So, these are just, the tools that you can use. Obviously, HTTP, HTTPS, and, the example is obviously that I'm giving you this lab this week. And so it uses, HTTP, HTTPS, creating some kind of a web application. So a lot of these things for monitoring are web solutions usually, right? So you saw SNMP uses CACD. If we talk about Spiceworks for a help desk online for tickets, that's a way of monitoring that, the things that are being fixed, everything, and that's going to be, HTTP. Obviously, we talked about SNMP. And then you have FTP and secure FTP services. You can see there, and those are for transferring files, as you know, right? So if you're, setting up, moving files around, just like you would, maybe SSH and configure things, you can also move files with it. And then finally, there's Syslog. And this is one service that is pretty important. As I said, there's a lot of services out there in Unix. So the way Syslog works is basically you have a Syslog server, right? You have a Syslog server, and then then you have machines again in the network, just like that have Syslog on them. Okay, so you have machines that have Syslog on them. All right, and so they are configured in such a way that they are logging everything that's happening, and that's also important, right? So if something happens in the system, we learned at some point in the semester we could write scripts for logging things into text files. We could log our names, right? That's one of the things that we did, but you can also log many other things. And so that information that gets logged, if this is a router or a firewall or something, it might have limited hard drive space for storing data. So you don't really want to store the data here, right? And so the data could be sent via the network to a Syslog server. So this would be a Syslog server, right? That would be a Syslog server. It's going to receive the information. And then this is also really useful because then you can centralize the way that you analyze your logs in the system itself. Okay, so that's basically another tool that you could use for network management. So this, again, you could do your project just on this one, right? So set up 2-3 VMs, make one of them a Syslog server on all Unix machines, and then configure on the other ones Syslog clients, and then have the Syslog clients send the data to the Syslog server. You can analyze it. You can write Python scripts to go through the logs, just like we did in one of the exams, and then you can extract the data, okay? So all of these protocols can also be thought of as helpful for monitoring, for management of the systems, etc. Can you guys hear me better now, or how was that?
That was pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah.
When I did break up, it was still, what's the word? Understandable.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I have no
I do
idea.
not believe you're doing it on purpose.
No. Believe me, I want things to go smoothly with these online things. All right, so let's see. So now, we have Telnet and Secure Shell. So I've talked about it basically, and you guys have used it, right? But I want to touch on all these services because you always use them a lot. So, they have ports associated with them, and that's really what's, one of the important things that you're always going to, this is not the last time that you've seen Telnet and Secure Shell, right? You're going to deal with them quite a bit and explore them in a lot of detail, but they are services. So they, as we talked on Monday, we talked about remote services. They enable remote device to log into a server and run commands. So obviously you need to have it's a client server architecture, right? These are TCP, right? TCP, and this one uses SSL, right? And so you need to have, a server running the service and then a client that connects to it, right? And this server can be a switch, a router, a firewall, a VPN, a gateway, almost anything with an IP address, right? So for instance, if you have a, a firewall in the network, a hard physical firewall, you can start the service on the device, connect to it. Just like you would start, Apache and then open port 80 and so on. So you have all these capabilities in all types of devices. Right? So, typical use, an operator runs an interactive configuration changes. This is a remote router to change an ACL. Right? So that's, obviously you have to enable this. There's sometimes, just like with snmp, there might be a little bit of security there to authorize that manager. But after that, you should be able to connect, okay? And this is, for updating the software, as you know, upgrades, that's, and next week we'll talk about upgrades and updates, and because it's part of the security, right? So we all know about patching and updating is one of the most critical things that you always have to be doing, okay? It's like right now we're using this tool Zoom, and it's being patched almost like daily, right? Because it had, it wasn't really meant for this scale of use. All right. All right. So that's Telnet. As I said, it uses TCP. In 454 we will talk about the vulnerabilities. There's a vulnerability for Telnet called hijacking. It's difficult though. It's not exact. I mean, even though the data is not encrypted, if you wanted to hijack a session, you really have to figure out these sequence numbers. And figuring out these sequence numbers is not actually easy. Even if you have access to the network, is still, the numbers are pseudo-random numbers that are really large. So you can't do a dictionary attack on sequence numbers. They're changing constantly. So you have to kind of get them and then replace them. But we'll see basically what this this talks a little bit about the security. And so that's why, because Telnet does not encrypt. Also in 454, we'll do a lab where we steal the password through Telnet and the session hijacking. So we shall see that, there's vulnerabilities there. And that's why SSH, as you guys should be convinced, is superior. We also did this in the file system analysis lab, as you know. You basically use netcat and then use SSH, and SSH was just to ensure that encryption has taken place. All right. The recommendations, use SSH mainly, and then you want to, limit access to this program. You use, basically the administrators, you have to have mechanisms in place so that not everyone can remote into a system. So that's usually defined in your policy. All right, HTTP, HTTPS, that's, basically the one of the main focus of this this week, right? So we talked about it. So, both are used for many of the same functions as Telnet and SSH, right? Basically you can also use this for configuration, software updates, right? And that basically what that means is like with CACD, right? With CACD, you could in theory, not only get information, but also set information. If snmp was enabled to allow you to set information remotely, then from something like CACD or your own Python script, you can obviously do it. Okay, so but as you know, web is something that you can use for just about anything. And you can see that. So check status, or some configuration changes. Right, then about the difference between HTTP and HTTPS is basically cryptography, so that should be pretty clear. SNMP, I'm not going to talk about it, of course, because we've already spent a lot of time on it, but that this is one of the other services. And then can set SNMP servers as read only. It's basically for network monitoring. All right, so I'll skip this slide since we've covered it. FTP, as you know, is basically for file transfer. All right, and that's basically you have configuration files, you have scripts that you want to move to your servers, and so this will would help you. All right. All right, and we talked about Syslog. Syslog is a standard for computer data logging, right? So that's the formal definition of it. It separates the software that generates messages from the system that stores them, right? And that's really the idea. So you don't want to store the data sometimes in the router or the firewall. They could just, you can log a lot, right? So you don't want to run out of space, especially if you have limited, small router, etc. you don't want to, so you want to have a means of sending the data across the network to a Syslog server. Right, and then from there, the other advantage of that is that the Syslog server has the data centralized, and so you can read the data from there and then create reports for analysis. So Syslog can be used for both computer system management, okay, because, like I said, one of the key things that I wanted you to understand, and that becomes very obvious with Syslog, is that with Python, you can write any script that you want to parse any kind of text file, right? And to analyze the data. As you know, something like Syslog generates a lot of text data. So it generates a lot of text data in the form of logs. And so then from there, you can write your own code to basically extract information from those logs, right? So it's very useful for, managing the systems, viewing the systems, and also for security auditing. So auditing just basically means, you trace, you go through the record, the logs, and you try to figure out, if something has happened, okay? So that can be for debugging, that can be for, analysis, etc. All right, and Syslog is supported by a wide variety of devices, right? So a wide variety of devices. Okay, there's also, NetFlow, for instance, is a network protocol developed by Cisco Systems for collecting IP traffic information. And so this is just an example of other approaches, right? So record information about each flow sent across a router. So there's, there will be other services that can do this kind of work as well. Okay. You can see basically the exact same idea. At the end of the day, they all kind of work the same, right? So, you have the flow storage maybe separated, you have the device that receives the protocol, right? And then you have all machines sending the data, right? And then once you have that, then you have, the analyst, right? The system administrator. And the system administrator will write scripts, use some software that creates automatic reports, etc. And then at the end of the day, what you want to do is monitor, analyze, and take action. All right, so we talked about this, okay? Let's see. All right, the other, like I said, so before I move on, so are there any questions? Can you guys hear me better now? Did it continue to cut out, or has it?
Yeah, a little bit, but it was still intelligible to understand.
It's still cutting out, huh? I don't know, it might be usually it says something like your network connection is unstable, but I haven't even seen that. So I don't know. Yeah, okay. All right, well, let's continue then. All right, so, as you know, system administration, there's actually a topic on here on sysadmin that's just about, because that's what system administrators do, right? So at the end of the day, system administrators fix things, right? So fix things in the system. You're kind of just, when you say you're responsible for, implementing some system or, having a set of computers, even if they're computers in the cloud, you still have to do something with it, right? So at the end of the day, do updates, write new software, write new code. So at the end of the day, it involves a lot of debugging, fixing problems, and you want to fix them once, and that's what that means, and change management. So managing how, change works. So this is just, this cartoon is just a little funny joke. See the system administrator there, and you got all these these are all processes that, or things that they have to deal with in Unix. All right, so let's move on then. All right, so debugging, as you know, that's one of the main issues, right? So So basically in debugging, you first, you don't want to just try things, usually what I do when I have a problem is I look at it and then I look at the error message and then I try to find and I'm sure you guys do this too, I find the words in that error message that might be very easy to search on Google. Right? If I don't know the problem, I just copy that line, paste it in Google, and then go from there. Because usually when people have had that problem, they also got that same output. And so that's the thing that they need to fix. And so that's, kind of a standard approach, that pretty much everybody takes, I think, and I'm sure you guys do as well. You just get the the error message, copy pasted into, in a search engine of your choice. And then from there, you can basically, try to debug it, right? So that's, basically here, whether you're the customer or someone else is the customer, you learn the problem first, right? And then you try to figure out the cause and fix it and having the right tools, right? So that's really the process of debugging, very simple, really. And then the other idea is that you only want to fix things once, right? And that's why it's a good idea to actually have a ticketing system. Because in a ticket system, you get a problem, you deal with the problem, and part of the process of you being a system administrator should be that at the end of that ticket, you should say, okay, this was the problem, this was the solution, maybe here's the link to where I found it, in a message board or something. But that's always very helpful, because the next time that somebody has that same problem, they can just look it up in your system, and then maybe that information will be very, very helpful. All right, so that's definitely, like I said, these are more at this point, I'm just going over some of the managerial recommendations, from the standpoint of sysadmin. Okay, so you want to fix it once. So for instance, if you fix something but you didn't understand how you fixed it, that might be another problem, because in the future you might get that again and you still don't know how to fix it. So so again, this varies, obviously, right? But at the end of the day, these are just recommendations. So you probably want to avoid the temporary fix trap. Okay. Okay, and then you can read through these. I'm not, these are so much common sense that I don't necessarily need to explain them. So you can read through them. And automation, that's one thing that, if you've noticed, has been the common theme of this course, right? So the common theme of this course has been to automate everything, right? Try to have systems that actually fix things, or have scripts basically, and the scripts will actually, fix things, or you can always just run the script, is what I mean, and fix things. Okay. All right. So those are, that's kind of a wrap up of network management. Some of the additional topics that I wanted to talk about. Now, as I said, these slides that you see here, I'm not really going to go through every slide, because, as I said, these are things that you can easily read. They're common sense. Instead, I'm just going to point out some things, but I do want to stress, I always debate, which managerial things from the other book I should include in here. And I think customer care is definitely an important one. All right. So at the end of the day, as I said, you're providing, a service, a type of service, right? And so, there's basically, if you have that well structured by having a procedure, right, and by having a policy, those two things, although it seems like, trivial to think about those things, they're actually very useful, right? You can actually have a procedure and a policy, and they will, the procedure and the policy will support you and in addressing some of the common questions that occur whenever you're doing customer care. Right, so so we can see here, system administrators spend much of their time responding to requests from customers, right? And this is particularly true if you work in like a help desk, right? So you're dealing with that. So responding to customer requests is a more specific task than the general issues that surround running a help desk, right? So customer requests are the trouble tickets, calls, right? Problem reports, that person that shows up at your office at 8 a.m. and they say they have an emergency because their computer is locked. Or, the poor professor whose students are telling him that his voice is cutting out, right? And he has no system administrator right now to help him. So, these are all everybody thinks that they have a priority, right? And so what you want to do is you want to somehow have a policy that helps you to deal with those requests that come in all the time. All right. So how well you respond to customer requests is critical to maintaining an organization's reputation, to keep everything going smoothly in your IT department. Any questions so far, guys?
No.
Making sense?
Yep.
Okay, great. So, just to kind of wrap up, there's actually a lot of slides in here, and I recommend that you read them. I'm really just going to look at this slide, which kind of summarizes a suggested approach to customer care. Do you have to do this? No, you can use your own common sense, but they felt that it was appropriate to put this in writing. So the method for processing these customer requests can have, they say 9 steps here, right? And basically there's one thing I think that's really important here. So obviously, greeting, then you want to figure out what's wrong, then you try to fix it, right? But at the end, don't forget to verify it, right? So, you want to make sure that in particular you fix it and you discuss it with the customer, because you are you are all very technically savvy people, right? So you see something, you really quickly understand it intuitively. You don't know someone else if they really even know what you did, or you may have solved it and they still don't understand. Okay, so this part of the process, verifying it with them, making sure they understand everything, it is critical as well. Okay, so that's really as far as customer care, I wanted to talk about this, and then basically the issue about policies. But then after that, the next slides just really talk about each individual one, so you can just read through those at your convenience. Okay, you can see there that basically it gives structure, and it really just talks about all of it, all the steps. You can take a look at it. Pretty intuitive. And then as you can see, the verification part at this point, the problem should have been remedied, but we need to verify that. And this phase isn't over until the customer agrees that the problem has been fixed. Okay, so that's really something that's really important here in this. Okay, so you can see, you can read through these as well. Okay, and then here it just summarizes it in an overview of the phases again, and it makes sense, right? These are the logical steps. What's wrong, fix it, and then verify. All right. Now the last thing I think, the last few things, help desks. I wanted to talk about that. I don't, as I said, I don't do a lab on help desks, but some students have used, over the years, many solutions. So if there's anyone there, for instance, in the course that still doesn't have a topic for 372, remember, you need to tell me what you're doing. Actually, I'm going to do this. Let's see how many people I have. Yeah, I have like a few students. So I want to see what topics you're working on. So remind me as soon as I finish these slides to kind of ask you guys. But this is one that you can always implement in Linux, and it's, you know, a ticketing system, a help desk, right? So at the end of the day, I kind of talked about this already. This would be a web application. This would be a web application, and it's really about, you know, a database in the background, and you're basically creating tickets, and then you are processing those tickets. Okay, so you're creating tickets, processing those tickets, and then tracking them in the system. And as I said, one of the important things is that you can actually save solutions. You can save solutions in the system, and this is so useful. This is a very useful thing that will certainly, I promise you, you know, if you're in that situation, this would really be nice to have. Because, you know, let's say, you know, there's an issue with, you know, my issue, right? Professor using Zoom says the audio is cutting out. Okay, but then you see that problem, and then, oh, well, this is fixed. We fixed it by resetting the router. That tells you immediately, even though you thought that you would have done that already, right? It still gives you a little bit of, okay, you know, they tried it and it worked, so I'm going to try it, and it might work for me. Okay. All right. So here, you know, a help desk, you know, I should, you know, obviously this is a system administration class, so I need to talk a little bit about a help desk. So you know, at least I'm going to provide you with a definition. It's a place, right? Real or virtual, right? It could be, you know, you can have now, especially what's going on now, you can have an OIT, you know, virtual meeting room, and people can go there to ask questions. So it's basically some kind of a thing. Plus there's the system, right? The ticketing system, so you can create tickets through that as well. Okay. But basically the definition of a help desk, the general one, it's a place, real or virtual, where people can get answers to their computing questions, report problems, and request new services. Nothing is more important than your help desk, right? It is the face of your organization, okay? The help desk staff make the first impression on your customers and maintain your relationship, good, bad, with them, right? So this is important, right? And there's, I should say, one common thing that happens is that, and I don't mean like, if you guys remember that, SNL sketch that they used to have with Jimmy Fallon, the computer guy. If you've never seen that, I recommend you go online and Google that. Jimmy Fallon, computer guy. And you'll see, you know, he was a help desk. And so he was very sarcastic and everything to people. But, and so there can be those kinds of issues, right? When you're very technically savvy and, you know, you get a little bit frustrated with your customers that don't understand you. But really, one of the common issues with services, with help desk, is the issue of security. Okay? So for instance, you know, you want your computer, right? You want to access your computer. You would like to VPN into your computer. You would like to do this or that. And sometimes the system administrators will push back because they know that by doing that, moving, let's say, you want to have remote into a computer in the labs, but they only want to have it in a data center because they only allow people to remote into computers to a data center, but they don't like people remoting into individual buildings, right, as a security concern. So that might be part of their policy. And even though that's something that you want as a new service, as a request, you might get pushback from security because of that. It's perfectly possible to do. You know, there's nothing that prevents it technically. It is just that policy-wise, they don't want to do that because that means that they now have to be concerned with security in other sectors of the network. All right, and so that's a common thing that might happen. And so, you know, that's an example of this idea of help. Any questions?
None for me.
And how's the audio? Still improving?
No, it's hovering at
really?
the same.
It's really the same, really?
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry. I don't know. Do you guys want me to restart the session?
No, let's keep going. If it gets completely in or unintelligible, I'll find a way to let you know.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Well, I can hear you fine. I don't know. Could it be maybe on your end?
He was no one else heard him chopping up a little bit there.
Not
It
much.
was for a little
I
bit.
heard it a little bit. Well, I don't know. You guys tell me. I mean, I'm happy to. We'll miss a few minutes, but I'm happy to reset my router. It'll take a few minutes for it, maybe, and I could restart my computer. That's about all I can think of.
I think you're not lagging too much, so I don't think we have to do that.
All right. So I don't know what else to. Any suggestions?
Just keep on going, and
Just keep on going? All right.
and if it completely breaks down, then
Maybe
we can restart.
maybe it's Zoom. Maybe it's just not having a good day today. I don't know. All right, so so let's keep going. Okay, so so we talked about the help desk. Okay, so the basics of running a help desk are first to simply have one and to ensure it has a friendly face. Okay. And then the help desk should have enough staff to support the traffic, a defined scope of coverage, and procedures, right? So in particular, you want to have procedures and policies. Okay, procedures and policies. Okay. And so let's see, have enough staff. So those are pretty obvious things. The defined scope of support, that just basically means, what kind of things you're going to support. You're going to support Windows, Linux, Mac, iPhones, iPads. That's basically the idea. What type of, Cisco equipment, networking equipment, printers, what exactly is it that you're going to try to support? Right, so you want to define that in some kind of a document. And that way you can always, as a system administrator, if you get a request for something, because you don't have to be a superhero, right? You don't have to always solve everything. You can always just refer back to your policy and say, okay, well, our policy says that this is what we work on. And so that way it gives you a way to nicely talk to a customer, and then you can always send that to the manager, to further discuss. And then, a few other things. Let's see. Specify how to get help. So usually this is a big problem from a managerial point of view, right? If you're a system administrator and every day that you come in at 8 a.m. and you want to do some work, you have somebody there waiting for you, and you have to go to their, you're not gonna be very efficient in your productivity. Right, so you want to define things, and you want to really document. You want a document that tells customers what to do to get help. Do they only use email, phone, or do they have a ticket system? And basically, they'll say, okay, please, even if they call you, okay, please submit the ticket. Once you submit the ticket, it'll be assigned, and then I can work on it. So in that, that varies. I mean, you can't always do that. It depends on the company, so you can't just say, But at the end of the day, that's why you want to have a document, right? So that's the idea, having a document, a policy that kind of governs how that gets done, okay? So that's the idea. All right. And so then, you design procedures. Now, escalation, you want to have some kind of a process for that as well, right? So, so there's just that you can see here the first line of escalation is a process by which an issue is moved from the current staff person to someone with more expertise. the first line operator should be able to handle 80% to 90% of all calls. Okay, because usually, there's a statistic out there that says that about 80% of the calls are repetitive, and this can vary obviously, but if you want to quantify it, 80% might say that that should be easy, repetitive problems, and then there will be that 20% that requires the the networking guru or the Linux guru or someone to come in and deal with it. Okay, and so you kind of want to have senior personnel maybe running that 20%, and then people that are starting in the task running that, addressing that 80% of the issues. Okay. Finally, defining what an emergency is. Obviously, an emergency is relative. I might call right now, panicking, saying, I have an emergency. Students can't hear me over the audio, or my printer, doesn't work, and I can't print the documents that I want. And so, what is an emergency really, right? And so that's something that you definitely want to address within your organization. Okay, so that's pretty much it, I think. Better advertising for the help desk. This is a very common thing, and I don't know if you guys have ever noticed it, but whenever something happens in the school, whenever a system goes down, or they always send out an email. They always send an email that says, hey, system went down, but then they send another system, hey, we fixed it, right? So basically, although this is not exactly that, but it's communication, right? Better advertising of the help desk, have a nice website, use email, and basically communicate. People actually, they might see a lot of things as junk mail, but people rarely see that as junk mail, right? They, whenever they see, oh, the system's down, the network is slow, do this or that, they see it as useful because, it is very critical to their work, right? And so that, being informed helps them to think, oh, it's not me on my end, something is going on, right? And that's it. Okay, so that's basically, kind of a few of the miscellaneous topics. Usually cover them at the end of the semester, which I think are important ones. Are there any questions or comments, guys?
No.
Nope. Everything clear? All right, great. The last part here, the last part of the slides is this one, automation and coding for system administration. So I usually just throw these together to really quickly point out what you already know, right? So this is kind of a summary. So this is the scripting part. So as there's Bash. And in this course, we could have either covered Bash or Python, right? And Bash is definitely important. It's not a language that is forgiving. It's a very, Bash is, the syntax is a little bit more complex. It's certainly, harder, but it's definitely a very powerful thing. So if you have time at some point, if you like Linux and if Linux is important to you, certainly getting better at Bash is important. Just like, getting better at Python, there's pretty much nothing. Hopefully with the course this semester, your eyes have been open to the power that, all the things that you can do with Python as well. And so that's really what this is about. Now, keep in mind, there are other scripting languages like Perl. I think, usually I try to give you at least 1 or 2 scripts in Perl just to kind of show you. I think we did 1, I believe. And so it's basically yet another scripting language. Ruby. Ruby is the scripting language, I think, that has been used for Metasploit. So I think you guys used Metasploit in 250, and you possibly saw that there. If you looked at the code, it would have been just another scripting language. Okay, Other languages, of course, PHP. So we talked about LAMP on Monday, correct? Guys, we talked about LAMP. You guys remember? You don't remember? I think we talked about LAMP on.
Yeah, I remember. Sorry, my
Yeah.
dog is being mean.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Right. Great. So you do remember LAMP, right? So that's that's an acronym that is important in Linux, Windows. It basically implies the stack that you're using for your server side coding, right? So you're using Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP usually. In this week's lab, you will be using Linux, Apache, not MySQL, but something called a round robin database. And you don't really even have to use it. Everything is done already in the code, but this is how you're going to store your data. You're going to save it in little text files, basically, that will have a .rd extension. So you will see these as you start running your lab, okay? And then as far as, so that would be the M here, and then the P for our case will be Python. Okay, so you will be using, and then this will generate, obviously, this will generate, HTML and so on, CSS and all that, okay? So anyway, these are the languages that we've covered basically that are important in Linux. Obviously, C++. We didn't really use that one. That's really if you want to build low-level things that are very, very powerful, performance with high performance. Just a little joke there between compiling and interpreted languages. And then, and then that's it basically. So that, that concludes slides that I had for today. Okay, and now I'm gonna move on to discussing the lab assignment. Are there any questions about any of the slides, anything?
No, sir.
Okay, great. So that's good. All right, so now let me think about this. I'm gonna create a slide here. So I have to share this, I think. Okay, so you should be seeing a white screen, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
All right, great, guys. So, so anyway, what is the lab? Okay, like I said, the lab does not include a lot of coding, right, in this assignment. What you have to do is, I'm going to go through the Word document, but basically, you're going to have, an snmp agent. You have an snmp agent, okay? And then you're going to have your computer where you have, you're building an snmp manager. So this time you are building an snmp manager, but you are building it using, you're going to build a website basically. That's the idea. A website or a web app. Okay. So how does it work? So you're going to need several things. One of them is, of course, you need to have Apache, right? And Apache needs to be linked, right? Somehow configured, etc. That's going to be your web server. Then on here, you're going to have, on the manager, you're going to have two scripts. You're going to have two scripts, right? One script will collect snmp data, right? One script. So that script, you know, this is the website that's here. One script will have to query this device, you know, so get a snmp get, and then an snmp response. Okay, and then once you collect the data, you need to store the data in a storage, in a you know, not a, it could be a database, but to keep it simple, I didn't use a database. Instead, I'm using what is called a round robin data. Round robin data. All right. It's basically a little text file. So it's a, you know, it's a .txt. All right. So the data is stored there. You know, if you remember, what you do with snmp is that you have data like this, right? You have data over time, t plus, you know, plus 1, t plus 2, and then you're recording points. You know, the data is fluctuating like that. You know, you can create graphs then based on that. So it's really, it's kind of time series data. And so this kind of round robin data is very useful for that. All right, so I think you set, you know, the amount of data that you store to like 256 and, you know, multiples of that. And so that's the amount of data that you can have in there, the amount of data points. So once you record those data points in the round robin database, then you're going to have another script. So this is script 1. These are both Python. And then the second script will read, so reads RRD files. It's going to read the RRD files, right? And it's going to, and generates the web data. And the web data basically includes just, you know, a list of information and also images. So it should include images, you know, just like you had in Cacti, right? It's going to generate those little images, you know, like the graph. So it'll generate like this, you know, something like that. And then you have to put, so obviously it's a website, right? So everything has to be put in the same place, right? And, you know, and you have to update the HTML file, and you have to update the figures, and then you have to link everything. And then when somebody goes to the browser, so somebody goes to the browser, they just type a URL, right? So they go to the URL, let's say here, I'm gonna create the URL box. The URL box. And then on here, they're gonna type, you know, something, right? And you have to decide what that's gonna be. Is that gonna be localhost, path to folder, or do you actually create, you know, create something like with DNS, right? So if you guys remember, you know, with DNS, we kind of link things, right? You know, where we could type a name here and then we could find it. So you need to do that whole configuration so that you can browse things on the Apache side. Okay, on the Apache side, you're basically going to set up the functionality so that you can now find your files. You basically, you know, distribute your files correctly in your system. Okay, so remember, usually you have things, you know, in var ww, right? And so you'll have to think about all of those issues. But at the end of the day, this brings together a lot of the things, again, that we've covered this semester. Now, one question I want to ask you. So first of all, this is what you have to do. So how would you run these? You have two scripts, right? One for collecting the snmp data and one, sorry, we have two scripts. One that collects the snmp data, gets that, then it returns. And then that data gets written to little text files called, you know, round robin. So they're going to have a .rrd extension, right? And then once you've got that data, you have to read it into this script and generate in a folder, let's call it web snmp. So you have a folder web snmp, you're gonna put the data there, and then once you've configured Apache, you will be able to browse this data. Do you see that? You see that, guys? So that's the overall process. So my question to you is, now this should be, this should exist, right? So if you're a system administrator, this is part of your network operations center, right? You go in on a Tuesday and you go to the, Tuesday at 8 a.m. you arrive. You don't touch the scripts, you don't touch anything. All you do is you go here to your browser, you type your website, and then you get your data and it's updated, right? It's updated based on whatever, because remember, this is Python code, so you really, could do whatever you want there. But you go here, right? You take a look at that, and now you view the data, right? So now you're going to view the results of this. So how would you update these databases regularly? And how would you then, because remember, once you update the databases, you also then need to read the information from the databases to generate images. So how would you do that regularly? Like on a regular basis, how would you do that? And how often would you do that? Do you guys understand my question?
Could you use a cron?
Say that again.
Could you use a cron job?
A cron entry, perfect, Susanna. That is that is actually the answer I was hoping you guys would say. Exactly. So cron is actually, so if you remember, cron, which is the tool that we learned at the very beginning of the semester, is the element that makes all of this fully automated. So you do it once, and then you just configure cron, and you are done. I mean, obviously, if you have errors, problems, you'll have to fix them. But assuming you've done everything correctly, your website over here will always be updated. Because what do you do, right? You're going to have a cron entry for this one, right? It runs that script every so often, however many, and then it generates these. So you have to save them in a specific location. And then after you've done that, then you run these possibly at different times. So you might say like, every hour on the even hour, I run the collection, and then every hour on the uneven hour, I run the generation of data from the text files. And so you've perfectly there for your own, company set up a fully automated application. So yes, your answer is correct. So does that make sense, guys? So part of the lab is you're gonna have to come up with those cron entries for all of this to work. All right, so okay, another thing, so let's see, let me go over. Let me go over now. So it seems like it's clear because I don't hear any questions. All right, so let's go to the Word document. I think I have that one. I'm going to share my screen here. Let me share. Here. Okay, so now you should all be looking at a Word document. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, so if you're all looking at this document, this is the handout for this week. as I said, this lab is easier than you think, right? So and if you have difficulty, it should be here, right? So the content, web hosting, the Apache part, that's really, you know, right. So right there. So that would be the hardest part. This, as I did say, this lab has a Wireshark reading. So if you remember, I mentioned that on Monday. This is an important reading, actually. Remember, all you have to do with this is do a summary, a one-page summary. You know, think of that as easy points. I mean, that, you know, that's a lab, and it's just read it. You know, it's for your own information on the things that you can do with Wireshark. So basically read it, and it's about basic system administration scenarios, which it should be pretty interesting. Reading assignment, and then just provide, you know, a one-page summary. I will create a Dropbox for this. Okay. All right. Then after that, you know, work on this lab assignment. Should be fun. One of the things, if you remember, is that last week I gave you a script, right? You probably remember I gave you a script last week, and the idea was that that script would query, you know, a variable, and you should have gotten, I think, system description, right? So in this lab, all I want you to do is just practice with it a little bit more, because really, I don't want you to code that much. You know, I kind of just don't want you to focus too much on that for this lab. So instead, you know, I gave you this one problem, problem one. Use the given snmp script that I gave you last week from, you know, and I actually wrote from last week to find values for the following object identifiers, or OIDs. And I've already defined object IDs and all that. So just now, make sure that you query system uptime, system object ID, contact, and so on. Okay, so convince yourself that you understand how to do that. Okay, and then you will report your results, of course, on that. Just provide some screenshots of it working, and that's really just, you know, that's most of the coding that I want you to do. Then after that, we will start basically from here. We will start the one single lab assignment. Remember that this I already gave you the big picture, right? You know, it's snmp, and then there's Apache. Those are the two big things. And remember, this is basically HTTP web services, the topic of this week. Okay, web services. All right, so so what is the objective here? Last week you used something called cacti, but it was something that you were just using. There was no real way for you to modify it, for you to, you know, change it. Here, although this one will be a lot simpler, it's not going to have the amazing looking graphics or anything like that. It still will allow you to do everything from code. Okay, from Python code. So now the goal here is that you will create your own cacti type program for network management. You will need several libraries. You will be using PySNMP, which I think you guys had to install last week, and the SNMP scripts, which I have already provided. Oh, actually, these scripts are on Blackboard. If you don't remember, on Monday, I went over all these details, right? I showed you in the Blackboard. I said, you know, this folder has the most files. You actually do need all those files, okay? Because one script calls another file, and then that file calls another one, and so on. You will create a folder on your desktop and call it WebSNMP. You know, you download the files, okay, from the folder. It's not called week 12. I changed the name. I think I called it probably like Apache SNMP or Web SNMP. And then you have to install these two libraries. Notice here the Python RRD tool, that's the round robin library, okay? And that's just basically the database. You will also use this one, Jinja, too. It'll help. It's a library that allows you to easily create websites. Now, in the document, the program that you have, it has to read a text file. So the program that you're creating will read a text file, and that text file will include the IPs of the machines that you want to manage. So this is how you would keep track of it, right? It makes sense that the list of IPs that I want to manage should be separate from the scripts that actually do the query. So you're going to have this text file. It's in there already, right? It shows you which IPs you're going to read, and it also shows you what OIDs you're going to query, right? So just like you have here. Now, this is not complicated. It might sound complicated, but it's not, okay? You know, the text file already has the format. All you have to, and I think I put like 2 or 3 IPs and 2 or 3 OIDs. So really all you have to do is change those IPs to your respective IPs. I suggest that you should query at least 2 VMs, you know, maybe the manager itself and then an agent, so you have 2. And then specify a few OIDs, and you will know about OIDs because you will have done this simple problem over here, okay? Are there any questions about what I just said? No questions? Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah, we can still hear you.
Did it improve by any chance? I'll look at this video carefully, but it hasn't improved?
It's improved.
It's improved, okay. Thanks. All right, so. Okay. All right, so it seems like there are no questions and everything looks like you're understanding, so that's good. You will need several OIDs to plot and analyze them, right? And so remember, at the end of the day, you're gonna generate graphs, right? Figures just exactly as you did with Cacti, but this time around with this approach. Some OIDs may not have data, as you know, right? Therefore, you will need to identify variables with data. You can use snmp walk to view the variables that have system values, okay? And the instructor will provide the scripts. They are on the blackboard, so they're literally there. Read through it, you know, you guys, you know, at this point, you know, should be getting, you know, quite comfortable with Python, so definitely read through it. There might be a few things in there that, but that's why I gave you the script, so that you don't have to write it from scratch. Now, this bullet 13 is pretty important, right? So what I'm saying here is integrate these scripts into the website you are developing in the section below. So actually what I did is, in this section, I just show you how, you know, I give you some instructions on how you would create a simple website. Not this website, but just a generic one, okay? And then here I'm showing you, you know, Susanna said with cron, right? I'm cron, you know, use cron, run both scripts, generate my data, okay? So now what you will have to do is, once you learn how to do this part, the Apache part, you will need to integrate it with the cron and scripts part. So you're building an actual application, you know, that's gonna run in real time, okay? And this would run, you know, if you had it in your own company or whatever, you know, you can set this up on your own, so no issues there. All right, so the next part then is that you will, okay, you will go here and you will read about Apache. All right, you can see an example here. You can go to apache.org, you know, and read about it, read all about it. As you know, this defines that the, you know, HTTP is a protocol. That's the host. That's the port number. That's the path, right? So that's the basic information. You know that a web server is a program that waits for requests that instruct it to serve or generate files, and it typically runs on port 80, okay? And it uses HTTP. And hopefully this will make you admire Linux even more. You know, Apache runs more than half of the world's web servers. So think about, you know, how much we live by the internet these days. And, you know, if you haven't thought about it, you know, Apache runs, which is basically Linux, right, runs more than half of the world's web servers. And probably it maybe even maybe has grown over time, okay? Okay, so that's your and then after that, I'm not going to go over this because this just gets into the configuration itself, right? So now from this point on, you would start to look at the configurations. So obviously install Apache. You know, by now, you know, keywords for this class were service, right? Automation, scripting, and system administrator, right? And so by now, you know about services because we've talked about so many of them, right? So in particular, the service, the daemon in Unix, in our Unix is Apache 2, right? And then from here on now, you know, you'll follow these instructions, you know, all these commands now very well, and you can start to look at the lab and perform the configuration, okay? So you'll follow these instructions. Remember, these are not tutorials. Don't just type things, think about it a little bit, and be aware that they're generic Unix instructions, and for each version of Linux, you know, whatever, if you're using 1604, 1804, you know, they change a little bit, right? So try to, you know, try to research the topics, but it shouldn't take that long. You know, as you saw, it's just a very few bullets. So once you have it, you know, once you figure it out, it should be pretty straightforward to configure. And I recommend that you really learn that well because, you know, as you know, you'll be building a lot of websites, you know, as IT people, you know, that's one of the pillars of IT, right? The internet. I mean, you guys love the internet, right? That's what you wanted to do. So, you know, web runs the internet. Finally, the student problems. Okay, and so I keep saying, you know, I said basically at the beginning that I mentioned the keyword knock, right? And so can anyone tell me what I said this stands for? What does the N stand for?
I'm going to take a wild guess and say network.
Yes. What was the O?
Is it operations?
Yes. And the C?
You know, I'm going to go with center.
You could have just answered the whole. All right, so network operations center, right? It's exactly, that's what you're trying to do, right? So that has been the theme of what we're looking at. We're not doing data analytics. We're not doing anything like that. We just wanted to create dashboards of data, right? And right now, you know, you have a dashboard for geolocation. You have a dashboard for with Cacti for snmp. Now you're building your own dashboard, right? So, you know, and all of this should then allow you to monitor, you know, your operations. That's really the key that's going on here. You know, that's really what we've been looking at in the course through Linux. All right, so you're going to basically then combine Apache and snmp, right? You know, we've already talked about it, you know, with cron, RRD, text files, and so on. And then you want to create a very simple knock website, right? So you're going to create that that knock website, and that's going to be, you know, mimicking, you know, your dashboard, your network operations center. All right, so, and then now this part, now where I say, now I want to, I'm sure I'm going to get tons of questions about emails about this. And I have so many emails. But anyway, so with 51, you can skip, okay? Do not do this. So skip. Okay? Don't do it. I was just saying there, you know, integrate Cacti and this lab together. It's not necessary, okay? Now, this one, I was just, you know, usually I like to, you know, challenge you to, but you can also skip this one. Okay, if you want to, you can do it, you know, integrate. I really just, all I will need to see is an example that you ran everything together with cron tabs, that you created the RRD files, and then I just need to see a few figures. I don't need to see a lot of results, but I definitely need to see at least one graph that you generated by using these code examples. You know, this integrates so many pieces that it's, you know, it's really, that's really what I'm looking at, is that you can, you know, now integrate a lot. You know, you're much better at configuring things, etc. All right, so, you know, you don't have to be creative then, just, you know, show that. All right. Right, so in particular, I just need to see the NOC website, as I said, with some graphs in it. Okay, that, I think that's that's all in this document. So as you can see, it's only 3 pages long. It's not very long, and all the code has been provided for you. Okay, any questions?
Nope.
All right, good. So seems like that's pretty clear. Okay, let me go back to the slides. So you should be looking at the slides that I had before. I just want to see if there's anything else I can give you as far as help. Oh, I'm going to give you some OIDs. Okay, so I'm going to give you some OIDs. You guys already know how to do snmp walks. You have that script for querying OIDs. So I'm going to give you some OIDs that you can try. Okay, and that's really all I'm doing here. So let me see. So 1, 3, 6, 1, 2, 1. And I'm not saying you have to use these, but what I'm saying is I believe these actually have data. And so that might be helpful in that sense. Okay. So, you know, obviously, if you've been paying attention to the lectures, you understand what I'm doing here. Okay, so those are some examples of OIDs that you can try. Okay. Don't forget that, you know, things, you know, you have community strings, right? What was the community string as it relates to
Public.
public, right? And that's just a password. So public, it's like a password. So don't forget that. Just trying to anticipate common mistakes. You're going to have you know, there's going to be a .cfg file in there. This is a text file. You know, basically the CFG is like configuration, right? So I forget the name of it, but I know it has, there's only one, and it has the extension CFG. And this will probably have the IPs and the OIDs. Now, I just want to stress that these are called in the file systems, because you actually don't just put an IP, right? You will create a system one, and then that system one has an IP, it has this and that. And then the OIDs are called checks. Okay, and it's the same idea. So the check will have information, including the OID number. So basically, you're going to have 2 for loops in the code all the time, for and for. And the idea is that you say something like for system, you know, from, or sorry, in, and then you're going to have a list of systems, right? And then for check in, and you're going to have a list of checks. So at the end of the day, you know, you're going to end up, and we've done a lot of this, right? So we've done a lot of examples that were like this. And so then at the end of the day, this ends up being, you know, one system can be associated with check 1, check 3, right? And then another system can be associated with check 2 and check 3, but not check 1. All right, so you know you have that flexibility as you're doing this in your you know, to solve your problem. And then don't forget to run these in cron, right? So in cron tabs. The last thing that I want to talk about is that, you know, creating websites, with that library, Jinja. And there, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of libraries for that. This is just one example. So this is called a templating framework for data flow. All right, so this is called a templating, like templates. So a templating framework for data flow. Okay, and so the way it works, I'm just going to give you an example. You're going to have Python scripts that are going to generate something like this. So this is a Python, you know, script, and it's going to generate. So it's going to generate, you know, the information. Oops. Going to generate the information. Name equal, let's say John, and you know, age 30, right? So you're going to have that, and then on the somewhere in the, that's why you have some, I think some .tpl files in that on Blackboard. These are the templates, and these templates, so these are the template files, right? And they're going to have something like this. They're going to be UL, so that's basically HTML, LI, and then in here they'll have a parameter called name. And if you notice, this parameter is this same parameter, right? So they're the same. And then you're just going to close it. Okay. And then you might have another one of these, LI. And that's just age. Okay. And that's LI as well. And then you close UL. Okay. So this one's the template, right? And then this one is the data. And then you're going to have the script will basically link these two, right? So the script will link these two. And as I said, all of this is done for you already. And so at the end of the day, it's going to produce the HTML file, which, as you might imagine, will look like UL, LI, John, right? And then LI 30, and then UL. Do you see that? So that's really what's gonna what's happening behind the scenes. So at the end of the day, you get this as output, but you have your data, which is coming from the RRD, and from other sources too. You know, it's coming from, you know, this, or it could come from the code itself, right? You know, that data, and then you have these templates, and these templates I've already provided for you in Blackboard, and then some script is going to combine everything. And then once you put these on your web snmp folder, then whenever you use your URL, guess what? You have your files. So the code is static in that sense, but cron is making it dynamic by regenerating the data constantly. All right, so that's the idea there. Okay, and that should be it as far as the instructions. The code is provided. All right, that's it. Are there any questions, guys?
None for me.
Not for you. Did it improve the audio, or it never got better?
It got better as time went on.
It got better. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Someone spoke over there. Yash, was that you?
Oh, no,
Okay.
that was someone else.
All right. Anyone else have questions?
I have a question about the research project.
Go ahead, please.
For the presentation, does it have to be like a Zoom presentation, or could we do a YouTube video, or?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, I've never done this. So initially I had said a YouTube video, but now that we've practiced Zoom, I mean, you guys can share your screens, right? I don't know if anyone wants to share their screen and just maybe, I believe you can. And
Yeah,
so-
I can share my screen if you want. I
Yeah,
mean, you
please,
can
Josh, go
take
ahead.
turns. Yeah.
Yeah, just pretend, for instance, that you're going to do your presentation, right? So share your screen.
I think you have to stop sharing
I
your
have
screen.
to stop mine. Okay, hold on.
I'll make up any presentation if somebody wants me to.
Did that work? Now, can you share? There you go. You see, so now we're looking at Yash, and then Yash, do your presentation, right? So,
Yo, what's that bloatware you got right there?
right. So see how, so this is, you know, I think this is it would be easier for you guys because you don't have to create videos, and then we can just record that whole session and we can post that on
Yeah, I think it will be easier rather than recording the YouTube video and then trying to install additional software that is already in the computer.
yeah. So that was you went to your slides and you could speak while you were doing that, correct?
Yeah.
Great. So you see that I think this would probably work really well, guys, because you can use your demos like that, and then as I said, we would record that video and post that on the channel.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, great.
I likewise have a question about our research project.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Do we have to get approval from you for the topic?
I would. Oh, yes. Let's do that. Let's do that. Since everyone is here, thank you for reminding me.
Yeah, I'd like to get approval now.
Yeah,
'cause
let's
I can
just
start
do that
working on
now.
it.
Let's just do that now. I'm gonna go down. So, Zach, what topic are you doing?
So I was thinking about doing. I was thinking about setting up two Linux servers, and it would be it would be the regular server, and then the other server would be the log server, because
A
one of the main,
syslog?
yeah, so one of the main things you want to have in your environment is you want to have your logs sent to another server in case
Guys, stay, guys. Don't.
in case somebody infiltrates your network and deletes logs, because that's the last step in the
Perfect.
in the
So
hacking process.
You would do a syslog then. That's good.
Yes, sir. Cool.
Yeah, that sounds
I got
perfect.
approval.
Yes, sir.
Booyah! Awesome. Thank you, Professor.
All right. Who is 1270? Don't leave, guys. Who is 127013? Okay, we have a mystery person. Alicia, what topic are you guys doing? Okay.
Microphone. Sorry, my microphone wasn't on. We're still having trouble deciding on what we're going to do for the
Okay, but
research.
you try to pick something because.
Yeah.
Yeah, so everyone's leaving, unfortunately.
Mm.
Cruz, you're still there? Cruz? Okay, you need to pick a topic, Cruz. Okay. Yeah. Brandon?
Yeah. We were thinking about doing a fog server. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit more?
So it's like a network-based imaging server. So we can create an image of one machine.
Oh,
then
and then,
deploy that.
like ghosting images, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to
Perfect.
deploy that over to a few different.
It's Unix, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Diana. Deanna McPartland. Okay, Yash, what are you doing?
I'm using Ansible for automation remote, like at a large scale. Like
What are
if
you
you have
gonna?
multiple like hosts in a company, you can you can initially like automate anything. You can run scripts on many hosts at the same time. You can schedule cron jobs, anything that you can, I mean, think of. You can automate it.
This is a Unix solution.
Yes, yeah,
Okay, so you would put agents on a machine, and then
right,
the manager, and then you would send the commands and everything.
right, yeah.
Perfect. Jackie.
I'm in Alicia's group. We're not too sure yet.
Okay. All right. Jonathan Dinga.
Yeah, our group has not decided yet as well.
Okay, you need to decide soon.
Okay.
Is that everyone? Did I miss anyone?
I think that's it.
That's it. You can remember, you can be in groups of one. You can be in groups of two. You can be in the same groups that you're doing your Hadoop, or you can form new groups. I mean, it's up to you. So, but just you have to do a presentation. You can do it as a group, or you can do it independently.
Okay, so it says we can code something or let's like set up an application. Is that what we're basically doing?
You could create, anything related to sysadmin that is Unix. You've heard all other ideas. You just have to pick.
Okay, so basically just get something set up for system
Yeah,
admin.
and
Okay.
exactly. I'm trying to see you take something that I didn't give you and configure it correctly in Linux.
Okay.
That is correct, sir.
Alrighty.
Again, who is 127.013? All right, then. All right, so I think that's everyone. So that's it for today. Work on your lab, please, and I will see you guys on Monday. Remember, if you have questions, I will have office hours on Thursday. All right, thanks.
Do you have the meeting room open during your office hours or something?
I do.
Or?
It's
Okay.
always open during the office hours. It's this same OID. Or, sorry, the same ID.
Okay. Alrighty. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a nice weekend, Professor Calix.
You too, Alicia. Thank you.